Welcome everyone. We'll start by setting our motivation with the four immeasurable thoughts and refuge in bodhicitta. And then we'll just do a few minutes of shamatha single-pointed meditation before we get into the teaching and the practice of tonight. So starting with the four immeasurable thoughts. May all sentient beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all sentient beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all sentient beings be inseparable from the happiness that is free from suffering. May all sentient beings abide in equanimity, free from desire for friends and hatred for enemies. So just letting your mind connect with each of those four: compassion, love, joy, and equanimity. You can repeat the words back to yourself or just connect with the essence. And then layering in refuge in bodhicitta. Sangye chudon sogi chunam la janchu padu dani kapsuchi dagi chunyan gi pe sonam gi drola penje sangye drupa sho sangye chudon sogi chunam la janchu padu dani kapsuchi Dagi chunyangi pe sonamgi rola penja sange drupa sho sange churon sogi chunam la janchu padu dani kapsuchi dagi chunyangi pe sonamgi rola penja sange drupa sho. And letting that connect. And then shifting your focus to single pointedness. Using the mind itself or the breath or a mental image. Stabilize your mind on just one focal object internally. And use that simple single focus to allow surface distractions to settle. And as distractions arise or different sensory experiences pull focus, just notice that and gently disengage and come back to your meditation, stabilizing on the breath or the mind or a mental image, choosing that one simple thing as your anchor to the present and your mode for developing concentration. And gently relax your attention. Okay. So today we're going to mainly be doing a practice that's related to Chenresig. And Chenresig, most of you know, is the Buddha of compassion. His Sanskrit name is Avalokiteshvara, and maybe known in the Pure Land tradition as Guan Yin. So when we do these practices together with a deity that embodies and represents and holds qualities like compassion, we're inviting compassionate wisdom to support us in our practice, but we're also inviting our own mind to ripen those qualities of compassion and wisdom. So really feel that these practices are going both directions. May we have support, may we give support. May we have support, may we give support, and particularly in the energy and alignment of compassionate wisdom. So it's a Chenresig practice that merges Lojong thought transformation. And the Lojong text that it merges with is the 8 verses by Geshe Langritangpa, which I think a lot of you know as well. And when we look at Geshe Langritangpa's 8 verses of thought transformation, they sometimes can be misunderstood, and sometimes they can be taken literally in the wrong way, and sometimes they, you have the imprints for them to make sense right away. But because they're so commonly misunderstood, I thought I would just go through them briefly and just kind of make sure that we're all on the same page with those 8 verses of thought transformation and see if there's any questions. And then we'd move to doing the practice of ever-flowing nectar of Bodhicitta, which combines Chenresig together with 8 verses. So that's what we'll do tonight. So we'll just start at the beginning with the 8 verses and look at verse number 1. So verse number 1 is determined to obtain the greatest possible benefit from all sentient beings who are more precious than a wish-fulfilling jewel. I shall hold them most dear at all times. And this is a translation from Lama Zopa Rinpoche, and so you'll find variations in some of the word choices. But the idea is to start with the premise that working to benefit others benefits you. Yeah, so we're starting a little bit coarse, a little bit superficial in the way that we operate in the world more compassionately. And then as the verses go, they get more and more subtle and they get more and more deep into the heart of compassion and less worldly. So in the beginning, it can be a little embarrassing to admit, but it's important to acknowledge the human tendency to only do something for others if there's something in it for us. Yeah. And it's human and it seems a little coarse and superficial, but in the beginning of practice, it's important to acknowledge that exists in our practice. And gradually we try to expand the heart to be more and more without those kind of coarse motivations. But in the beginning, we need to think, what is in it for me to benefit others? So this kind of wise selfishness that His Holiness mentions in some of his public teachings is really acknowledging that the benefit we derive in life is from our interactions with other people and other beings besides humans, right? Animals, etc. And if we really want to be benefited, we need to hold them dear. Holding them dear, holding them sacred, holding them with respect, holding them with kindness, really in a genuine way is going to make all of our relationships better. And then we're going to be taken care of better. And it's so obvious and so straightforward and so common sense that sometimes we miss that piece when we really feel alone or disconnected or unsupported. We don't often ask, am I supportive? Do I support other people? Am I the good friend to them? We just think, what's wrong with them that they don't look after me, or what's wrong with me that they don't care about me? But we don't think, well, what am I doing? Am I creating the causes in this life? Am I creating the causes for future lives to get the support and love that I need? And so it's counterintuitive, but if you're feeling a little bit like you could use a bit more support, shift the focus and think, all right, well, what can I do to support others genuinely? And that relationship building will then have an effect in your everyday life. So it starts basic, it starts common sense, but it's important to start there and to really look at what does it mean to hold sentient beings as a wish-fulfilling jewel? This kind of archetypal or metaphoric or folk tale of a wish-fulfilling jewel that you'll find in some Tibetan stories. The idea is if you found a wish-fulfilling jewel, you could get whatever wealth you wanted. You could get the best house, you could get the best resources, you could get the most beautiful decorations and the most glorious everything. A wish-fulfilling jewel would give you everything you need. And the verse is asking us to see sentient beings as more precious than that. Why are they more precious than that? Through our interactions with other people, all of our skills are developed. Yeah, our patience, our love, our compassion, so many skills we wouldn't have without interaction with other people. The helpful ones, the harmful ones, the neutral ones, all of the mixtures and reiterations of those in our life, all of these relationships are what are so precious to us because they're what help develop our character. And they're what is really what facilitates our spiritual path. So sentient beings can be held most dear and be seen as more precious than a wish-fulfilling gem if you really look at what they give you. And in an everyday sense, of course, they, facilitate all of our resources, the roads we use, the houses we live in, all of the infrastructure that we use every single day and just kind of take for granted as like inanimate objects or something unrelated to people. We forget people made them and they're structures we use because sentient beings created them to help sentient beings. Sentient beings helping sentient beings is what makes the world go around. So starting here, that verse is a little challenging, but not particularly confusing. Yeah, that one usually makes sense pretty easily, just with a little bit of thought. Later, they get a little bit more triggering. So we start with this wise selfishness. We start with this understanding of reciprocity. We start with this understanding that even the difficult sentient beings are helping us because they're helping us develop qualities, etc. Then we get right into one of the confronting ones. And this verse says, when in the company of others, I shall always consider myself the lowest of all, and from the depths of my heart, hold others dear and supreme. When in the company of others, I shall always consider myself the lowest of all. That's a provocative statement. So when you read that, what's the positive, useful, healthy way to approach a verse like that, do you think? Does anyone feel comfortable sharing?
Uh, Humility and non-self-centeredness is what comes to mind.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Do you see any pitfalls that could occur if you adopt this attitude the
Oh
wrong?
yeah, yeah. It can hook right into American conditioned low self-esteem and hatred and self-hatred and destructive ways of relating to oneself.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. And so we have to remember that in Buddhism, we're not trying to be a martyr. That's not a Buddhist thing. To be a martyr is not a Buddhist thing. To be sort of like self-effacing and humble in a way that's actually looking down on yourself and looking down on your, essential nature, that's not a Buddhist idea either. We have a fundamental purity, which is the reality of our mind. Yeah, its relative nature is clarity and awareness. Its ultimate nature is its lack of inherent existence. And that means it's something you can develop into enlightenment. So there's nothing to look down on because this potential of your mind is just incredibly precious. It's unbelievable, the potential. But by adopting the attitude of being the lowest of all, you immediately bring some spaciousness to the interactions. You don't have to win. You don't have to dominate. You don't need to be the authority figure. You don't need to control things. And when you're in that positioning, then people feel like they can breathe around you. Yeah, they don't feel like you're trying to get all in their business and try and, kind of maneuver them and manipulate them. When you're the lowest of all, you're adopting a position of strength, of dignity. You're saying, I'm strong enough for you to stand on my shoulders. There's also that element. So there's the element of really true humility, humility that's not humiliation, humility that's not low self-esteem. But there's also kind of an interesting form of strength. And it's a little bit like the way we feel if we're playing a competitive game with a little kid. Yeah, if we're playing with a little kid, we don't need to win, right? It would be a little silly if we really tried to win. It would be kind of embarrassing if we felt like we had to win. So you're going to try because you want to give a challenge to them and you want it to be fun and playful. But you feel secure in your own self enough that you don't need to trump a tiny kid. Yeah, it just comes naturally to us. We, of course, want children to succeed. So, sometimes you might challenge them and sometimes you might not, and you play it in the moment, but the need for you to be on top isn't there. Yeah. So sometimes you might win just to help them understand how life works, but that need to win is gone when you're playing with little kids, right? And that need to win is something that really makes relationships more difficult. The need to be on top, the need to be the authority, the need to be the controller. So if you're adopting this attitude of, I'm strong enough for you to stand on me, or I'm strong enough to lose, or I'm strong enough to be humble, that's what we're looking at. It's kind of a dignified, service sort of oriented way of positioning yourself with sentient beings. And the result of that is that, yes, they feel easier around you, but you also benefit because you listen differently. If you're the expert, you're not listening. If you're thinking, I have something I can learn from everyone, then you're so much more receptive to life and all the different forms of wisdom that people can share. So, this attitude of humility, from our perspective, comes from a place of deep confidence. It's confidence in your potential rather than identifying with your accomplishments. Yeah. Identifying with your accomplishments is like, who cares? Right? They only make any kind of impression in certain groups of people at certain groups at certain times. It's like, whatever. Yeah. But really thinking about your potential to develop, to change, to grow, that you can really feel such confidence in without needing to look down on anyone else because they also have that potential. So seeing yourself as the lowest of all is a difficult attitude to adopt, but I think now that we're workshopping a little bit, hopefully you can see what the benefit is and the way in which it's being invited into our practice. Does anyone have questions about that particular one? That's one of the sticky ones that people get stuck on. Okay, so many levels of benefit in adopting these attitudes, but as Jordan was saying, it's not about low self-esteem or self-hatred or anything like that. Please don't go that direction with it. The number 3 is an easy one. 3 is vigilant. The moment a delusion appears in my mind, endangering myself and others, I shall confront and avert it without delay. So vigilant here has the connotation of mindfulness, has the connotation of introspection, of just being focused and attentive to what's going on in your own mind. And if you're attentive with this kind of agenda to check, then if you catch a small negative emotion starting to arise, like a little impatience or like a little annoyance, if you notice it, sometimes the noticing itself is enough for it to dissolve. If you let it get ahead of steam, if you let it get momentum and it turns into full-fledged anger, it is much harder to dispel. So saying vigilant the moment delusion appears in my mind, that's a big ask unless you remember that, but if I do that, I'm going to save so much time. If I do that, I'm going to save so much negative karma creation. If I do that, I'm going to save so many relationship issues because you're not letting negative states of mind take over. You're catching them before they have a chance to grow. And one of the ways to do that is to think they endanger myself and others. Negative states of mind left unchecked ruin my peace of mind, lead to me making bad choices, hurt other people, etc., etc. And so just really thinking that these are dangerous. You know, you're careful on the road of other drivers because if you know if you're not being careful, it's dangerous. It's a similar kind of focus of it's a focus without stress necessarily. You just know what could happen if you let down a certain type of attentiveness. You know, you can slide into a terrible mood, you can slide into a depression, you can slide into this melancholy place where you really are in your own sadness and don't notice what's going on for other people, and you yourself feel isolated and alone. Or you can slide into just irritable and critical and grumpy and just annoyed at everyone and everything. And when we've had really bad days with really bad moods, we might have been able to prevent it if we had caught it when it was little. But you know, when you're in a terrible mood, there's almost nothing that will get you out of it other than to let it just roll through and finish. Yeah, when it's really up, you know, you can try and not make bad statements to people. You can try and not send emails and text messages. You can try and not act with your speech and your body in a negative way when you have a terrible mood. But to get out of the terrible mood is very difficult. But to get out of a tiny bad mood, very easy. So mindfulness needs to have the agenda of how do I want my mind to be? What attitude do I want to have towards others? And then mindfulness is checking, am I sliding off the path or not? And then it just makes very gentle course corrections that are no big deal. Yeah. But often we wait till there's like an event to perk up and be alert and to be focused. You know, so it's important to kind of adjust the way you look at your own introspection and your own self-awareness to try and keep it turned on the whole time rather than only turning it on when things start to slide. So that verse is pretty straightforward. Then this one is interesting. This is another one of the very confronting ones. Verse 4 says, "Whenever I see beings who are wicked in nature and overwhelmed by violent negative actions and suffering, I shall hold such rare ones dear, as if I had found a precious treasure." So, a being that is wicked in nature and overwhelmed by violent negative actions and suffering can be looked at in two ways. And there's a beautiful commentary by His Holiness the Dalai Lama on the 8 verses that talks about this a bit. And he says, basically, one side is you've met someone who's strongly habituated to hurting others. Yeah, they've strongly habituated their mind to harden their heart. And they genuinely wish other people ill and are plotting and planning ways to take advantage of others. And to say wicked in nature doesn't mean it's forever. It doesn't mean it's fate. It doesn't mean it's inherent, but it means it's so strongly habituated that that's their default way of being. Yeah. And these are rare ones. There's difficult people in our life, but people that genuinely want to do harm and plan to do harm are rare. People that incidentally do harm or, make mistakes, that's quite common. But, these rare ones that really have a bad motivation consistently are rare. And it's the result of mental habituation and negative states of mind and suffering. So these ones are one side that we're looking at. The other side are perhaps people that we have aversion towards because there's something about them that triggers us. And this could be people that are vulnerable, actually. People that have a physical disability or a mental disability that for some reason we can't get our head around and we feel kind of unstable around. So maybe, I live in Portland, so maybe you're walking around downtown Portland and there's someone who is houseless, and the unhoused person has mental health issues, and because of their mental health issues, they're sort of shouting at the air and they might not smell very good. And you have aversion arise, even though you feel bad for them, you're also a little scared. So these are also rare ones that we're trying to hold dear. So in His Holiness's commentary, he's saying you can use, literal people who are really habituated to what we would call evil, or people that aren't at all habituated to those sorts of things, but who trigger a same kind of repellent reaction in us. We don't want that to be our reaction to suffering. We don't want our reaction to suffering to be, oh, we want to be practical and we want to be careful, but we want to really genuinely lean in and see the human being there who's struggling, for example, right? So these rare ones are dear because they show us something about how conditional our compassion is. We might feel like we have unconditional compassion until challenged, because we have pretty good compassion with people, generally speaking. We're nice people, we mean well. We do have compassion for people. But then you get one of these rare ones that really seeks to harm or has really got things that trigger you. That is a precious treasure, that one. And so when you're looking at these verses, really ask, what do you think Geshe Langritangpa is suggesting? Why would he suggest that? Hold them dear like you'd found a precious treasure. This is really an important statement because that's the opposite of our reaction. Our reaction is get away from me. So when we see beings like this, it doesn't mean you're not allowed to have boundaries. You're absolutely allowed to have boundaries. You're encouraged to have boundaries. But holding them dear means not avoiding giving them a place in your heart. It doesn't mean they need to be in your everyday life. If it's not healthy for them and it's not healthy for you to have them in your everyday life, be practical. But you're not shutting your heart to them, and you're actually grateful that they're showing you yourself. They're like holding up a mirror, and you go, oh, I didn't realize I had that gap in my compassion. I had that reactivity with people who are habituated in this way or that way. So they really are precious, and I'm grateful to them. It's easier said than done, but I think you can touch the logic. Do you have any thoughts about that one or questions about that one? It can relate to people in your everyday life, or it can relate to famous people or, celebrities or politicians, or, it can relate to any number of people that you see them and you go, ugh, with quite a lot of strength. Those ones that trigger a big reaction of aversion from you, that's who we're talking about.
Yeah, think the hardest application is when when you're confronted really quickly. My difficulty, I ride my bicycle a lot, and yet a few days ago, somebody really aggressively passed me in a big truck, really close, like,
Yeah.
coming over in the lane where they're not supposed to be as in the bike lane. And it's just, oh, the fear and then the anger are just like that. And so I have to manage that more carefully, figure out, okay, do I
Mm.
maybe ride on a different street? But I mean that's a temporary band-aid, of course. But it's just, yeah, like you say, it's shows you your edge of where you still need to work and refining the mindfulness so that it can respond even faster,
Yeah.
with an appropriate skillful response.
Yeah, yeah, and those sort of situations are so useful because there's a reasonable side of your observation, which was that was dangerous. I wish he hadn't done that, and that's completely reasonable. But then your reaction of rage is feels like inevitable. It feels like you have to have that response when people do that wrong thing. And if you don't have that response, it somehow negates your observation that that was the wrong thing. And that's not true. Of course you can be like, that was the wrong thing, but I'm not disturbed by it. And that's the tricky training that's really being suggested to us is to be able to make a normal, practical, worldly observation of, well, that's not ideal, but it doesn't disturb your mental peace.
I
You
just
know,
want to give a shout out to my Dharma brother, Stephen Benoit. I remember we were riding home on bicycles like 15 years ago from a Dharma teaching with some Rinpoche, and I think a vehicle passed us really closely, and we started talking about this very subject, and he was like, "Oh, all I do is just notice, oh, that was scary,
yeah,
and I move on, and I'm like, oh, thank you, Stephen."
I aspire to this way of reacting. Yeah. Yeah. But it's a helpful, I think, to be able to like honor the wisdom of your observations. Because, if you feel like, oh, I shouldn't feel this way, I shouldn't react this way, sometimes it also feels like you need to get rid of your observation, and it's like, no, they're two separate things. You can keep your observation. That was valid. Yeah. And how can I react differently? Yeah. Eleanor, did you have something? Oh, go ahead and unmute. There you go.
Yeah, I forget.
Oh, you're muted again.
Sorry.
Ah, you're right. Nice.
I remember reading recently that, and I cannot remember where it was, but when something like that happens, you meet somebody that you have an aversion for, or, there's something about them that triggers something quite deep inside you, to look on them maybe as a bodhisattva,
Mm,
presenting as a bodhisattva. And in that way, it's, kind of, it's helpful, to see it as a moment that you can deepen your practice, really.
mm.
Yeah. Or deepen my practice. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a really
Mm.
good point because we don't know who anyone is,
No.
the idea. And we might think, oh, well, I can tell who someone is by their behavior, but it's not so simple as that. It could be that the Buddha is manifesting as a very difficult person
Mm.
in a very difficult situation. And then the person who's very sweet to you and always does everything you want is just a regular person. And the Buddha is the
Mm.
one giving you the hardest time. And the one supporting you is just a regular person with regular compassion, or vice versa. But, it's like you see someone in your life very kind to you, very consistent, very stable, very generous. And you think, oh, they might be a bodhisattva. They might be a Buddha. Yeah, they might. But they could also just be a regular person who's very kind, and a
Mm.
very difficult person could be, a plant, right? Like the
Mm.
Buddha could be like, do you know what? I think this is going to help facilitate your growth. Phew, scary truck.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
We never know. It's an
Mm.
important kind of position to adopt. But if you adopt the attitude that everything can be a teaching if you want it to be. Yeah, if you decide that it is, you will make it so. So make it so. Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So then we have number 5, which is when out of envy others mistreat me with abuse, insults, or the like, I shall accept defeat and offer the victory to others. So this one is quite like verse 2, seeing yourself as the lowest of all. This one of accepting defeat and offering the victory, it's a similar kind of idea. So it starts when out of envy. So that's quite interesting. If people are mistreating me with abuse, insults, or the like, we don't often stop and think that they're jealous of us. Yeah, because, sometimes they are doing it for other reasons, but it's an interesting place to consider of who would be jealous of me? I'm just an ordinary person with my ordinary life and my ordinary whatever. It's weird to consider, but if someone's really having a go at you and they're really going in, why? Yeah, what is that about? And sometimes thinking, what if it's jealousy? It can kind of soften you a little bit in a strange way. You go, wow, they're jealous of me. If they only knew, if they only knew how silly I was, or if they only knew how messy my life was, if they only knew, they wouldn't be jealous at all. Oh, that's so poignant. They're jealous of little old me. It can kind of soften you to think, oh, this one who's insulting me feels somehow challenged. They feel like they need to rise up and do something. They're triggered by me. I don't want people to be triggered by me. And so it's almost like that very abuse and insults they're throwing at you makes you have even more compassion because you go, oh, how much they must be struggling that I am a threat to them. Little old me. What, how poignant it is. So it's one way of kind of playing with it. But the second half of the verse, I'll accept defeat and offer the victory to others. It really is a lot like creating safe space where there's no competition here. You can win. If it's important for you to win, you can win. And something that our Tibetan teachers say a lot to us is that there are very few things more important than harmony. And that can be misunderstood to mean be complacent about people's bad behavior and don't be assertive. And that's not what they mean, but they mean that how often do you really need to make a stand? Only occasionally. With big moral issues, you need to make a stand sometimes, right? For the greater good, for your own integrity, for the well-being of the community, you need to make a stand. You need to win, right? But most of the time, it doesn't matter. Most of the time, these little petty victories actually undermine our connection with other people. But if they need them for now, let them have them. So this one is tricky because you don't want to be kind of like, you win, and kind of like a passive aggressive way, or a martyred way of, no, whatever, I don't care. That's not what we're talking about. It's really genuinely offering something to them. You can have that point. Yeah, it's a way of encouraging harmony, and you just don't want to go so far with it that then you allow their behavior when it becomes harmful to others. Yeah, but if it's just a competition between you and them, they can win. They can win. So this one, is often misunderstood, and people go too far with it one way or another. They think, oh, that's not having any positive pride in yourself. That's not having any confidence or any kind of, appreciation of yourself, just letting people win. And that's bad for them. It enables them, lets them get away with bad behavior. And then they think this verse is stupid. Or they go the other way and they offer the victory so much, so often in every single context, too literally, when really it's a positioning, it's a mental positioning that doesn't need to play the game. And that mental positioning that doesn't need to play the game, again, is another one of the things that changes atmosphere between people. And then you don't get into competitive anything. competitive, health comparisons, who's the sickest, who's hurting the most, who's struggled the most in their life, or into competitions about, who has studied the most or practiced the most or has the most fancy teachers, or who is the whoever, It's like, if you genuinely don't care, it actually makes people feel happier with you. And if they're the sort of person that matters a lot and they're driven by a lot of worldly ambition, they're probably going to keep fighting to win regardless of your stance. So you might kind of get rid of that habit a little sooner if you don't join them in their game. Yeah, or their game at least doesn't distress you because you're not hooked. So there's a lot of angles to look at with this one, but it's the similar idea to verse 2. So it's not being a doormat, it's getting out of the game. And then this one is about betrayal, verse 6. It says, when someone whom I've benefited and in whom I have great hopes, when one of those people gives me a terrible harm, I shall regard that person as my holy guru. So someone that you really built up in your mind as, they're going to appreciate me. They're someone that I really have hopes in, hopes for our relationship in the future, hopes for their, life path. This can happen with parents and children a lot, someone you've benefited a lot and in whom you have great hopes, like your child, like your partner, like a coworker that you're mentoring, like a friend you've given a lot of attention to. You've got great hopes, you've given them a lot of benefit, and then they turn around and stab you in the back or are ungrateful in some way. That one is your holy guru. That's the one that teaches you so much, just like those rare ones we hold dear. But in this case, it's someone that you have such a close relationship with and you've really put a lot of work into it. Yeah, so betrayal is a fascinating one to work with because it's fine to have agreements in various types of relationships. You're married, you agree to be only with each other, and adultery is a betrayal. That's an agreement you made, and it makes perfect sense to be upset to be betrayed. Or, you make an agreement between someone of, I'll help you this far, and then later you help me there. Lots of parents have assumptions that if I look after you well, child, you will look after me in my old age. A lot of assumptions there. And some of those are fine if they're agreements that both sides made, and the consequence of breaking it is something both sides agreed. But so much of the time we have made a deal without asking the other person. Yeah, we decided this was what the relationship was. If I do this, you'll do that, without even checking with them. Do you agree? Do you understand? Do you accept? We just have all these assumptions. So there's that case. And then there's the case where there has been an agreement that's been broached or a promise that's been broken. And in those cases, even more so, they are your holy guru. They really are bringing up for you what are the priorities in your life in terms of things that you need in a relationship and things that you expect from other people, and being able to sift out what of that is attachment and objectification and what of that is normal and good, not normal and afflicted. Yeah, and so the ways in which we objectify other people, we make them into objects all the time. And we say, this person, you are the one that gives me this feeling. You're the person that gives me that feeling. We make them into these little puppets, and then if they don't behave, we're mad at them. But they're their own being. They're not there to serve us. And so it's really, betrayals like this can really help you see how much you objectified someone and are so frustrated that they're not giving you what you think you're supposed to be given, like their food, and now you're mad at it for not digesting well. It's not fair to treat people like that. People are too complex. So, betrayal is something that you want to kind of sit with of, when am I just, going to hold some assertiveness and say, this is what I need in order to proceed in a relationship? And what are the things where you realize, actually, that was a one-sided agreement? Yeah. Or that was an agreement based on objectification. Because when you're in a truly loving space, a truly compassionate space, say like with your, I don't know, a pet, sometimes you're a bit unconditional with a pet, depends, on the day. But, you feed them every day, you cuddle them every day, you make sure they're warm enough and they got a cozy bed and that they're getting to the vet regularly. And, we put a lot of energy into our pets. And, if they turn around and scratch us or bite us, we think, oh, honey, what's wrong? Yeah. We're not, you betrayed me. We're like, I didn't expect anything from you. You're an animal. You know, it's amazing that you like to hang out with me. That's great. Thanks, buddy. Pet. But, they turn around and bite you. You might be surprised. You might even be scared for a second, but you're not like, oh, you betrayed me. Because it's in the nature of an animal to react that way when they're in pressures or situations where they feel uncomfortable. And then we put all this pressure on human beings as if we were so different to animals, and we're really not. You're like, so I'm going to do good things for you because it's kind to do good things for you. Just like I'm going to feed my pet and keep him cozy and warm because that's a kind thing to do. And if it winds up that they're my buddy, that's great. And if it winds up they're one of those ones that likes their own space, okay, fair enough. Same with people. It's an interesting one, this particular verse. Um, do you have any thoughts that come up when you see this one?
I'll just share, I had a situation over the weekend, a longtime friend, and thing came up just back to, well, did I assume that we shared an agreement? And I checked and I realized later that we didn't actually have an agreement. Like there was, he thought one thing and I thought another thing, and I could have applied several of the other verses to it in the subsequent conversation, but yeah, just checking our mind and checking with the other person, investigating whether the agreement is actually shared.
Yeah. Yeah. It seems obvious, but we forget we already knew that. We already knew that, but then we forget. And then in those rare cases where it was a really active betrayal, where there was a solid agreement, even more so just kind of sitting with, but why did I give this external thing, this external relationship, the power to steal my peace? Why did I give it all this power? Of course, we've been conditioned to, and we have karma and et cetera, et cetera. We know why, but kind of sitting from that empowered stance of, so that was something I didn't want to happen. And now I'm making it worse for myself by taking it on board. You could just be, oh, that's not what I wanted to happen. Okay, adjust. Right? But you're like, how dare you? What is wrong with me? What is wrong with you? And then it's a whole melodrama. And that whole melodrama is unnecessary. It feels so natural because it's so habitual. But the melodrama isn't necessary. And in fact, it wastes huge amounts of time and creates so much negative karma. So it's kind of like you have to be sympathetic to yourself that, of course, you're not going to respond the elegant way you would like to respond when we're sitting here quietly and comfortably looking at verses that we love. When life happens, it just kind of smashes into you and you do your best with where your head's at that particular moment. But when you think about these things deeply in calm moments, they are a lot more likely to kick in and support you in difficult moments. That's the thing is, the more we repeat these things, and, this particular set of verses, probably some of us have been reciting for decades. It's not new ideas, but every time you bring it forefront to your mind, it sticks better. And that's the real protection of Dharma. The protection of Dharma is the Dharma you integrate, protects your mind from suffering and afflictions. So, it's like you give yourself a break if you don't react perfectly in the moment, but know that the very repetition we're doing now helps prepare you for the next moment. Yeah. So then verse 7, both directly and indirectly do I offer every happiness and benefit to all my mothers. I shall secretly take upon myself all their harmful actions and suffering. So this verse is pointing to Tonglen, the practice of giving and taking. And you're taking suffering and the causes of suffering onto the negative self-cherishing thought. And you're giving happiness and the causes of happiness to all sentient beings. And this visualization rides on the breath, and it's a beautiful visualization, and it's a beautiful teaching, and that's what the commentary to this verse is to do Tonglen. But there's also ways of looking at it just in a more everyday way. When you look at, okay, directly and indirectly, I want to benefit sentient beings, my mothers, because all sentient beings have been my mothers countless time in the past. And when they were my mother, they were so kind to me. Okay, how do I offer them benefit directly and indirectly? And you just think what supports their well-being, what supports their practice, etc., and secretly take upon myself all their harmful actions and suffering. That secretly is quietly it rides on the breath with Tonglen, but secretly is also don't expect applause, right? Like don't perform virtue like a performance. Do it anonymously. Do kind things with anonymity. And also, when they do the wrong thing, hold their secrets. Don't punish them for their mistakes, unless it's the case where you need to prevent harm from spreading to other people. But sometimes it's like you had a conversation with a friend, and in an unguarded moment, they said something really stupid. And now you're telling all your other friends about this stupid thing they said. That's not the Bodhisattva path. So, you're secretly taking on their suffering in that way. You're holding the fact that, do you know what? Other people don't need to know that they made that mistake. Other people don't need to know that they slipped in that way. The only time other people need to know the mistakes of others is when it's ongoing and harmful. But there's a lot of just miscellaneous mistakes that people do that have no ongoing sort of plan. They're not repeating the harm. It was a weak moment. It was a silly thing they said. We could secretly take on their suffering in that way. Yeah. And particularly if it's something like they've revealed a secret to you about something they did in their past or something in their past that they feel a lot of shame about that is not ongoing at all, and you choose to spread that around. I mean, what good is that? That's so unkind. Someone tells you that they were, an alcoholic for 20 years and now they've been sober for another 20 years, but sometimes they have this or that urge or this or that feeling of weakness and vulnerability, and they share that with you. That's so sacred. Yeah. And now you're going around and telling other people why, you know? But we do this, like we get like a little piece of gossip and then we're like, woohoo, now I have something fun to talk about. And so this secretly can be read in a lot of different ways, but it's not about keep secrets about ongoing harm or keep secrets in a way that's detrimental to a community. It's about you don't need to gossip. Yeah, and we can hold some disclosures with really that sacredness that appreciates that they felt enough trust to share with us. Or those times when they've made mistakes that really they don't need to be weaponized later, like guess what they did. We don't need to be petty like that. So this one is got some beautiful things to think about, and to think that you can be benefiting sentient beings directly in ways that are obvious, but also indirectly in ways that don't get applause, that is with anonymity, and that can be very good for subduing your ego, to just do something kind purely because it's kind. So however you read this in a kind of obvious Tonglen way, or if you kind of look at the way that plays out in daily life, this one is a really beautiful one as well. And then the last one is undefiled by the stains of the superstitions of the 8 worldly concerns. May I, by perceiving all phenomena as illusory, be released from the bondage of attachment. So the bondage of attachment, or the habit of staying in perpetual craving, that was started by our ignorance, or which has been there from beginningless time with our innate ignorance, that bondage of attachment is why we have the superstitions of the eight worldly concerns. The superstitions of the eight worldly concerns is really just all of our neurotic way of trying to get a pleasant feeling and to avoid an unpleasant feeling. Now, to want a pleasant feeling and to avoid an unpleasant feeling is perfectly fine, but our strategies are completely tainted by these superstitions or these misconceptions. So we're not challenging the fact that, well, of course we want to be comfortable. All sentient beings want happiness. All sentient beings want to be free from suffering. That's fine. But our strategies are bound to fail because they're driven by attachment, and attachment exaggerates. So your whole life you're going through trying to get this comfort, totally normal, but you're thinking that the comfort and satisfaction comes from just a perpetual fidgeting, right? Externally and internally, just fidgeting and readjusting and readjusting. And I'll be happy if I get this. I'll be sad if I lose that. I'll be happy if people speak nicely to me. I'll be sad if they criticize me. I'll be happy if people think well of me. I'll be sad if they think poorly of me. And these pairs of false hope and false fears that the eight worldly concerns give us, this is how we live our life. So if we want to cut through that illusion, we need to see the illusion as the illusion. Yeah, the drive is completely fine, but the strategy is totally flawed. We're relying on the outside world, situation, objects, people, as the source of our happiness as opposed to a condition for our happiness. And we think when we're suffering, it's because the outside world is giving us suffering. A person gave us suffering. Our past gave us suffering. Our trauma gave us suffering. It has a relationship to our suffering, absolutely. But it's a condition, not a cause. We created the cause in our own mental continuum. And that at first is confronting, and at second is empowering, because now you get to create your future differently. But the only way to do that is to break through the lie of these illusions. That really the biggest one is that things appear as inherently existent just as they are, when they're completely lacking inherent existence. So that last one is really the wisdom verse, and it brings it all together. Okay, we'll do the practice. So first, just come to your posture and re-stabilize your posture. And if it helps, you can take a few intentional deep breaths just to get yourself grounded. And think I'm doing this practice of ever-flowing nectar of bodhicitta in order to develop my bodhicitta, in order to eventually become like Chenresig, the Buddha of compassion. And so visualize Chenresig in the space in front, radiant white, made of transparent light, three-dimensional and real. 1,000 arms, an eye in the palm of every hand, seeing the suffering of all sentient beings, holding them in his compassionate gaze. He's standing on a lotus, sun, and full moon, adorned with celestial cloths. He has 11 heads. The first 9 are in colors of white, red, and green. Peaceful, smiling benevolently. the white heads representing peace, the green heads, increase, the red, power, and above them is the wrathful blue-black face, for when a certain fierce aspect is needed in order to enact compassion, looking wrathful, but embodying that perfect compassion. And at the very top is Amitabha, one in nature with our own root guru, reinforcing our connection to Amitabha's pure land. And so whether you're able to visualize in detail or not, just feel that compassionate wisdom is embodied and present here in the space in front. One in nature with all of your teachers. And with awareness of Chenresig, then we add the prayers. Sangye churon sogi chunam lai janchu padu dani kapsochi dagi jinsogi pesonam ki rola penchia sangye drupa sho sangye churon sogi chunam lai janchu padu dani kapsochi Dagi jinsogi pesonam ki drola penche sange drupasho sange churon sogi chunam la janchu padurani kapsuchi Dagi jinsogi pesonam ki drola penche sange drupasho. I prostrate to the holy body of the Supreme Arya, Great Compassionate One. I present clouds of every type of offering, both actually arranged and mentally emanated. I confess all my negative actions and downfalls collected from beginningless time. I rejoice in the virtues of ordinary beings and Aryas. Please remain until the end of cyclic existence and turn the wheel of Dharma for transmigratory beings. I dedicate my own and others' virtues to the great enlightenment. Ni day again body sangye jindu mi te wulwa yidroi kunam dam Jin la cho pa sho. Please bless us that the lives of the glorious gurus be long, that all beings equaling the extent of space be happy, that I and others without exception collect merits and purify obscurations, and that we quickly achieve Buddhahood. Precious Guru, please grant me that all realizations of the path, from correctly following the virtuous friend up to the completion of training, the unified state of Vajradhara. Please bless my mind to become Dharma, Dharma to become the path, and the path to be without obstacles. that I may cease all wrong concepts and immediately generate the two precious bodhicittas. Yedam Guru Ratnam Mandala Kamniyatayami. And Guru Chenresig is extremely pleased with my request, and together with the moon disk and lotus, comes to the crown of my head. And so stabilize once again, Chenresig, this time above your crown, facing the same direction as you. And then adding the verses. Determined to obtain the greatest possible benefit from all sentient beings who are more precious than a wish-fulfilling jewel, I hold them most dear at all times. And so visualize blissful white nectar flows down from Chenresig's heart center, down through the crown of your head. Down and through you, it purifies all obscurations, especially self-cherishing thought that prevents you from holding others most dear, and brings all the realizations, especially loving kindness, compassion, and bodhicitta, which holds others most dear. So be with verse 1 and add that visualization and those thoughts. And shift to verse 2. Wherever I am and with whomever I'm with, may I always consider myself the lowest of all, and from the depths of my heart, hold others dear and supreme. Visualize blissful white nectar purifies all obscurations, especially the self-cherishing thought that prevents you from considering yourself the lowest of all, and from holding others dear and supreme, and brings all the realizations, especially loving kindness, compassion, and bodhicitta, which considers yourself the lowest of all and holds others dear and supreme. Stabilizing verse 2, adding the visualization. And verse 3, in all my actions, I examine my mental continuum And the minute a delusion arises, since it endangers myself and others, I forcefully confront and avert it. Blissful white nectar purifies all obscurations, especially the self-cherishing thought that prevents you from confronting and averting delusions the minute they arise, and brings all realizations, especially loving kindness, compassion, and bodhicitta, as well as the wisdom that realizes the emptiness of inherent existence, which ceases all delusions. Stabilizing that. And verse 4. Whenever I see sentient beings who are wicked in nature and overwhelmed by negative actions and heavy suffering, I shall hold such rare ones dear, as if I had found a precious treasure. The blissful white nectar purifies all obscurations, especially the self-cherishing thought that prevents you from holding wicked sentient beings dear, and brings all realizations, especially loving kindness, compassion, and bodhicitta, which holds them as dear as a precious treasure. Stabilizing that. When, out of envy, others mistreat me with abuse, insults, or the like, I accept defeat and offer the victory to them. The blissful white nectar purifies all obscurations, especially the self-cherishing thought that prevents you from accepting defeat and offering the victory to others, and brings all realizations, especially loving kindness, compassion, and bodhicitta, which accepts defeat and offers the victory to others. Stabilizing that. Verse 6. When someone whom I have benefited and in whom I have great hopes, gives me terrible harm. I shall regard them as my virtuous friend, my guru. The blissful white nectar purifies all obscurations, especially the self-cherishing thought, prevents you from seeing those who harm you as your holy virtuous friend, and brings all realizations, especially loving kindness, compassion, and bodhicitta, which enables you to achieve the perfection of patience and to see harmful beings as your holy virtuous friend. Verse 7. In short, both directly and indirectly, do I offer every happiness and benefit to all my mothers. I secretly take upon myself all their harms and sufferings. The blissful white nectar purifies all obscurations, especially the self-cherishing thought that prevents you from offering every happiness and benefit all mother sentient beings, and secretly taking upon yourself all their harmful actions and suffering. Brings all realizations, especially loving kindness, compassion, and bodhicitta, which offers every happiness and benefit to others, and takes all their harmful actions and suffering upon yourself. Verse 8. Also, I do not defile all these practices with the stains of the superstitions of the 8 worldly concerns, and by knowing all phenomena to be illusory, without trusting in them, I am freed from bondage. The blissful white nectar purifies all obscurations, especially self-cherishing thought that causes the 8 worldly concerns, and the ignorance that prevents you from perceiving all phenomena as illusory, and brings all realizations, especially the wisdom realizing emptiness, which perceives all phenomena as illusory, and by which you are released from the bondage of delusion and karma. And then we request, Great Compassionate One, Please extend your holy hand and lead me and all other sentient beings to your blissful pure realm after this life. Be our virtuous friend in all our lives and quickly lead us to Buddhahood. Think that Guru Chenresig accepts your request and innumerable nectar beams flow into your body. All of your negative karmas, obscurations, diseases, and spirit harms are instantly purified. Your body becomes clear as crystal. And then Chenresig melts into light and dissolves into you, blessing your body, speech, and mind. And he reappears in the space in front, sending out light in all directions, bringing out the compassionate energy of all sentient beings, including yourself. Light going out in all directions. Concentrate on this visualization as you recite the mantra. Om Mani Padme Hum. 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 And relax the visualization and dedicate the merits you've collected by doing this practice. Due to all the past, present, and future merits collected by me, and all the merits of the 3 times collected by the numberless Buddhas and numberless sentient beings, may Bodhicitta be generated in the hearts of all the sentient beings of the 6 realms, and especially in the hearts of everybody in this world, including all the students, benefactors, and volunteers in the FPMT organization and in DFF. May it be generated in the hearts of all those who rely upon me, all those for whom I have promised to pray, and all those whose names have been given to me. May it be generated in my heart and in the hearts of all my family members, those who are living and those who have died. May the bodhicitta that has already been generated increase. Whenever suffering transmigratory beings experience, may it all ripen on me. Whatever happiness and virtue I accumulate, may it all ripen on others. May I never be discouraged, even for a moment, from practicing the deeds of the bodhisattvas for the sake of others, by completely renouncing anything done for my own sake, and by engaging in the holy actions of the kind founder, Guru Shakyamuni Buddha. Due to all the past, present, and future merits collected by me, and all the merits of the 3 times collected by the numberless Buddhas and numberless sentient beings, which are completely empty of existing from their own side, may I, who am completely empty of existing from my own side, achieve the state of great compassionate one, which is completely empty of existing from its own side, and lead all sentient beings who are completely empty of existing from their own side to the state of the great compassionate one, which is completely empty of existing but from its own side, by myself alone, who am completely empty of existing from my own side. Okay. So thank you very much, everyone, and have a good night and happy practicing.